From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider. I'm your host, as always, Mike Finger, joined by our panel of Express News Spurs beat writers, Jeff McDonald and Tom Orsborn, along with sports editor Nick Talbot. If I sound a bit frazzled, if this podcast isn't its usual award-winning, just entertaining, overwhelmingly worthwhile self this week, it's my fault. I'm going to take responsibility. We're a bit behind schedule this morning. So we can't always be perfect. Much like your local Cagers, you can get off to a great start, encouraging start to a season, and then have it all fall apart. So I just want to open this podcast by saying, sorry, guys, it's on me.
That was very accountable.
That was a great intro. It's like you just hit the ground running. It was I don't know.
Yeah, well,
it was like watching Mickey Mantle hit 3 home runs hungover.
Yeah, something like that. Like, that's not too far off base. Might not get 3 home runs today, but the San Antonio Spurs, who are the subject of this podcast most weeks, at least they are. Sometimes they're not. We didn't have an official prediction when we ended last week's episode. Could have gone a number of ways, but I think this is yet another week of the 2024-2025 season. Seems like every week we've done this, we've sort of known what was coming. I think this sort of qualifies again. The Spurs last week took care of the Washington Wizards. That seems like ages ago. And then suffered back-to-back losses to the Los Angeles Lakers. That one in the NBA Cup at the AT&T Center, or at the Frost Bank Center, sorry. Hard-fought loss, their entertaining game in the Emirates NBA Cup. And then a game where basically nobody played. It was a punt game at the Mavericks. We're recording this, as always, on Tuesday, hitting your digital players on Wednesday. So this is one of those occasions where we will not talk about a game that has happened in the past. Who knows what happened last night against the Thunder? It might have been an all-timer. But those first 3, Tom Orsborn, kind of what you expected, what stood out from that group?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't much of a surprise. Losing Wemby to the bruised knee in the Lakers game, that was disappointing. Out again against Oklahoma City. But yeah, that, like you said, Mike, that Lakers game was a lot of fun. Just really hard-fought game, and made me look forward to the November 27th game against the Lakers coming up.
Thanksgiving Eve, where everybody will be there with bells on. The Lakers game, I think, is one that we're going to lead with talking about in detail this week because it was the most interesting. Even though it was a Spurs loss, you can go back to the first game last year when the first ever meeting of these 2 generational superstars, LeBron James and the most hyped rookie since LeBron James, Victor Wembanyama, when they met at the Frost last year. That was a game that the Spurs actually won. But in talking to Victor after this one, he pointed out that so much has changed in the years since, and that now the Spurs almost feel more in control of things. And even though the Spurs lost this one, I think there's just a much different, this isn't exactly breaking news, Jeff, but there's just a much different vibe around this team, and there's much more of a sense of possibility as to what can happen this year. And I don't think that a loss to the Lakers, hard-fought loss, down to the wire loss, changed that much. Do you?
No, and I think a lot of that is the Chris Paul effects. A little of that is the Harrison Barnes effects. And then a big portion of it is just everyone else having been through the battles for a year and is a year older, including Victor himself. But also a big part of that Lakers game down the stretch was a guy who has technically not been in many of those battles in Steph Castle. Like, he made play after play down the stretch of that Lakers game. One that comes to mind is just he drove LeBron James to the basket and finished a left-handed layup on him in the last couple minutes, like in a very tight spot, very key spot. And for him to be 20 years old doing that type of stuff already and in the Spurs closing lineup against the Lakers already is really that says something. That really tells you what they think of him and where the Spurs think he's going. And that's, to me, you started this by asking about Victor, but to me the thing that stood out from that game was the new rookie, Stephon Castle.
Yeah, here at the Spurs Insider, we hate cliches. Like we consider ourselves above those tropes, that nonsense, just stuff you hear on every podcast, every highlight reel, every post game news conference. But the whole no moment is too big for him thing, like not impressed by anything. Like Stephon Castle seems to meet all of that. Like legitimately, he played in a Final Four. He won a national championship at UConn as a teenager. He comes into this league, like you said, taking LeBron James, one of the greatest of all time, if not top 3, top 2, whatever, and just does not seem that impressed by it. And that's a quality that probably gets that's a description that probably gets overused by a lot in talking about sports these days, but I think it does fit him accurately. He is a guy who I think is going to be really good in the long term. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to be really good this season, and he's already really good now. That pick might work out.
Just taking it one cliche at a time, he's just a guy that moves on to the next play, and that is an underrated skill when you're, playing in the first 12 games of your NBA career. Is just, I made a bad play, go on to the next one. I made a good play, go on to the next one. Just like you said, unimpressed or unbothered by anything. And that's a huge step for a young kid, a huge skill for a young guy, and he's already got it.
He's got that quality that Chris Paul has at age 39. You think this is the first time I've faced a great player?
That's right.
He's already got it. It's unspoken, but you can sense it with him.
Our buddy Chris Paul. You think this is the first time he's ever given out 12,000 assists?
For the viewers and listeners, followers at home, we've already got Chris Paul jokes back in the media room at the Frost Bank Center. It's with love, it's with respect, admiration. Chris Paul, you can ask him anything, and he's seen it before. Something that the Spurs probably like about him, like not going to be impressed by anything. You think this is the first time I've ever given out a 12,000th assist in my career? Maybe it is, but I'm not going to act like it. Pretty cool. Another thing that we do not endorse here at the Spurs Insider, we don't endorse cliches. We definitely do not endorse gambling on sports, and we don't do award talk. Like longtime listeners of the Spurs Insiders know how much the host of Spurs Insider hates award talk, particularly like before the holiday season even starts. So if you're out there wondering if we're going to talk about awards for young Stephon Castle, let me tell you, go outside, like enjoy life, do something fun.
Touch grass, they say. Touch grass.
Touch grass. But let me tell you this: to combine all these things that we don't like here at the Spurs Insider, like if you are one of those deviants, those derelicts, those degenerates who are into the sports gambling, like the odds on young Stephon Castle for Rookie of the Year seem really, really unrealistically long right now. Like I don't care if he wins it. I'm not going to talk about him winning it, but if he's like listed as the 10th or 11th guy on the list, like that's probably not going to stay that way all year. And I think that when we are forced to talk about this in February and March, I think the context, the discussion is going to be a lot different because he's going to continue to have a really good year.
The fact that he was not on like people's top 10 rookie lists surprised me. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to rake our colleagues at various outlets over the coals, but I clicked on those things and like he's not even in the top 10, really.
It's just it's hard to do those lists. It's like you do those lists, and our colleagues who do those lists because they get clicks. That's the whole reason, and because people enjoy clicking on lists. Like that's not exactly breaking news. Like
Right.
I think
They click and get outraged that Stephon Castle is in the top 10. But,
right,
but they gave you your click.
But it's hard to do those, and so what you can't possibly watch all the games,
Right.
Especially all the games this early in the season. Like you're not going to be tuning into Spurs Wizards. And you're an international NBA writer.
A lot of these lists were probably done before he was actually starting.
Yeah.
So he's just the bench guy averaging 5 points a game. I can see it if you're just looking at the box scores.
But if you work stuff about that, like go touch grass, as Jeff said. Don't worry about it.
No, you should write letters and maybe storm the Capitol.
Let's not do that.
But since he's been starting Steph Castle, he's been pretty good. And whether he stays there or not, once everybody is back, the whole band is back together, I don't know. But he's been pretty good as a starter.
Pretty good.
I guess someone asked me on maybe the bad side or the good side. I can't remember which one because there's two now. But asked me.
Or neither's one. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, the two exist in the world.
Yeah.
Asked me if Steph Castle will be the starting point guard by the end of the year, right? And I said, well, like if they trade Chris Paul, but that was kind of his point. Like, yeah, Chris Paul is going to be traded, probably, maybe, possibly. It's definitely a possibility.
I'm not sure about that.
It's definitely a possibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there's a scenario where we get to February and he's put in his time with the Spurs and would like to spend the rest of his possible final season like playing for someone that might be going to the playoffs, and the Spurs might make that happen for him. And if that does, I think Steph Castle will be your starting point guard.
I think that's it. That transitions nicely into sort of a fascinating question. And I'm going to manipulate the circumstances here. I'm going to manipulate the rules, because I think if the Spurs are 10 games out of the play-in at some point, and there's a team in the playoffs that needs a point guard, then that trade is obvious. But let me posit this: that what if the Spurs are within 2 games of the play-in, and Chris Paul is enjoying his time here, playing well here, like the games matter here. He's still starting at point guard, still getting his minutes. And like the teams that might want to trade for Chris Paul aren't trading for him to be the starting point guard. They're trading. They might be interested in him coming off the bench on a might be championship contender. Not necessarily like the old Golden State Warriors who were clearly on their way to the finals. No team like that. Like, forget what the Spurs might want to do. What might Chris Paul prefer? Just to keep hooping, to keep playing as the starter on a team that's fighting to get into the playoffs, as opposed to being sent somewhere to come off the bench.
You think this isn't the first time I vetoed a trade? Come on. Come on.
I just think there are like
you reaching.
That's another thing that Chris Paul says. There are definite scenarios where Chris Paul gets traded at the deadline to a team that's in the running for a championship, but I think there are also scenarios where Chris Paul plays the whole season here, and I wouldn't rule either out.
Right. I think a lot just depends on what he wants to do. And to start this season, obviously he wanted to play. That's why he signed with the Spurs, and I'm sure he could have gotten the same deal to be a bench player at a team for a team that's got that is an obvious playoff contender or an obvious championship contender. So he signed with the Spurs for the reasons he told us. He wanted to basically start and play a bunch of minutes.
Yeah.
Whether that's still true come February, and maybe if you think about, I got 2 months left of the season, and maybe playoffs to come, maybe that changes in his head. I don't know. Those will be good questions to ask him as we get closer to February, though.
His teammates would love to have him stay. I mean, we
for
talked
sure.
yesterday, Jeff, with Trey Jones, and just talking about how popular he is in the locker room, and how much affection the guys have for him already.
Well, it's not even in interviews, Tom. Like when we venture into the locker room after games, there's always some kind of heated discussion. There's sort of a catty corner from each other, are Keldon Johnson and Chris Paul around the sort of one of the locker room exits, and that is where the action is, man, between those two guys.
I'll be honest, it would drive me nuts. It would drive me nuts. Yeah, I would almost be like, on the team flight, could you guys just sit together, like in the back or something, and we just have this one nonstop talking section? I mean this with a lot of admiration, and I mean this even on the floor. Like Chris Paul never shuts up.
Never.
Never shuts up. And I think that actually we've kind of talked about this before, but I think that actually works on a young team. A young learning team actually wants to hear what Chris Paul has to say, wants to absorb it. When he says something, your Trey Joneses and your Julian Champagnies and your, name your 23-year-old guy, it means something to those guys. Whereas if he's on a team with a bunch of other all-stars, I think they probably just want him to shut up.
Heck, even Mitch Johnson's soaking it in.
I mean, yeah. Mitch Johnson is younger than Chris Paul by years.
And Chris Paul has veto power on challenges.
That's true.
I want to get to one of the names you just mentioned in a little bit, but as a little interval, I also want to talk about the sites that you mentioned. First of all, one site, the main site that you need to think about is expressnews.com. That's where all of the coverage that Jeff and Tom and your humble host, that's the clearinghouse. That's the place where you find all this coverage online. Expressnews.com. You
sign up for the newsletter. It'll come right to you.
Sign up for the Spurs newsletter. You can even subscribe to the Dead Tree Express News edition if you are an old soul or an old person.
Or smart, yeah.
Yes, it's great. The two sites Jeff was mentioning earlier, like where people talk about sports in little snippets on the internet. One of them is done. Like I don't care about it anymore. But I would really encourage, sincerely, like people to check out Blue Sky. It's a good place. Jeff's been live tweeting from there. Spurs live skeeting from Blue Sky.
What it's called?
Jeff and Tom, or Tom and I are both on there. People from around the league. It's a nice little community. There's no bots. There's none of the stuff that maybe you're into. You like the hate and the racism and the porn bots. Like that's much less there. I think it's a refreshing change of pace. If you want to follow your Express News people, your Spurs Insider people on the Blue Sky, we'd welcome you.
I would say that if you are really into people showing you their nudes unsolicited, not a good sign.
Do the other one. Yeah.
Do the other one. But yeah. If you don't want any unsolicited naked.
I do get lots of cat photos on Blue Sky. If so.
Well, that's good too. Yeah.
It's a different kind of photo.
Different dynamic. Lots of cat photos.
If you're into that. Like it's basically what it's a vibe, positive vibe.
It's a no judgment zone.
There you go.
Yeah.
I've been on this league a long time. You think I've never been on Blue Sky before? If you,
I think I've never changed to another app before. Come on.
Come on, man. And Howard Beck. But anyway,
but I wanted to.
Did Howard Beck pay you to say that?
Before that interlude, yeah, Howard Beck is a big proponent of Blue Sky. Friend of the podcast, Beck. Check him out.
I think we're legally required to call him the Great Howard Beck. Actually,
there you go. What I was going to get back to, a name you mentioned earlier, and I was going to give Jeff McDonald an opportunity to have a hot take on this podcast, which I know the listeners love. You, in passing, mentioned the name Julian Champagnie, and I wondered if you have any takes on him, Jeff.
My take is that I think he's an actual good player. I think he can be a rotation player on a playoff level team if the Spurs get to that, or on another playoff level team if it comes to that. You look at a lot of these guys that have come through during this era, and some of them look good for a while, and it's hard to kind of determine between are they just looking good because they're getting a lot of minutes on a bad team and being allowed to do whatever they want, get up as many shots as they want, or are they actually a good player? And I think Julian Champagnie is one that I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is I'm just a caveman, but I think he's a good player that could help the Spurs when they get to be fighting for playoff spots or another team. I think he's
You have a possibly crazy.
he reminds me of like the first or second year that Danny Green was around, and yeah, I mean they've both been around a couple of years, but like definitely better than Danny Green when Danny Green walked onto the scene. But an early Danny Green,
Interesting.
he reminds me of that. Knocks down the threes, plays defense. Like he's a really good defender. People are not an all NBA level defender, but really good in their scheme and what he does. Big and long for his position. And as he keeps knocking down those threes and shooting with confidence and playing with confidence, he looks to me like a guy that should stick around for a while.
I found that really interesting. I wanted to give you a chance to tell the listeners that. I'm glad you did. I think that I brought a new dimension to our podcast where we talk about basketball and make interesting observations. That might be a new thing we do.
Also, like making me defend things that I just type in the moment without really thinking about it. That's also fun.
Yeah,
That's great.
Hey, there was a 50-point game this week that in minute 20 whatever of this podcast we haven't mentioned yet.
Greg Popovich.
No, there was a 50-point game this week.
Oh, a 50-point game. I see what you said. I thought you said so I don't know.
50 piece.
There was a 50 piece.
Man, I've been in this.
Was that fun?
I think I've never seen a 50-point game before. Actually, not many.
Usually it's by the other team.
Right. Not many with the Spurs. I think LaMarcus was the only 50-point game I saw for the Spurs with my own eyes. I believe
Kyrie.
our man Mike Monroe covered the Tony Parker 55-point game in Minnesota way back in the day.
Tatum.
Those are the yeah. As far as the Spurs are concerned, I believe it's the Parker game, the Aldridge game, and the Wemby game are the only 50-point games of my vast beat writing era.
Mike and I tell 70 piece last year in Philly.
Tom Orsborn will appreciate this. I grew. The listeners don't care that much, but this is between me and Tom. As Tom knows, I grew up in a very small town, about 50 minutes from downtown San Antonio. A very, very Catholic community. Everyone went to the Catholic church. Every young boy who grew up in that town became an altar boy. And the altar boys every year had an outing paid for by, what was it, the whatever the society was there. I can't remember. But right. they would send us on an outing, and we went to go see a Spurs game. And in 1987, the altar boy outing went to Hemisphere Arena, and I saw David Robinson score 50 points.
Mm.
Can you imagine that? That was my first 50-point game with the altar boys.
87?
87. Oh, I'm sorry. That wasn't 87. That was an 80. It was. I just Googled it.
Yeah, a little bit.
Robinson 50 points. It probably was a little later than that.
Yeah.
89, 90, something like that.
But anyway,
it was a David Robinson game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. As far as altar boy stories go, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah, it was okay.
I thought that might have gone somewhere else, but we could.
I'll look that up later. It was probably, that seemed young when I just Googled David Robinson 50 points and it showed up 87. That seemed way early. Yeah, that would have been really young for me. I think it was 90s.
Dan. The list of his games here. So it's probably was it against Charlotte or Minnesota?
What year? What are the 2 years?
Well, 93 or 94.
90. It was
93 for Charlotte and 94 for Minnesota.
I think it was 93.
You were one old altar boy.
Yeah. Yeah, 87 seemed unrealistic. That was
Yeah.
and I was saying that seemed way too easy.
My
He
favorite.
wasn't in the league.
That's my favorite
Yeah.
part of this whole interaction is Tom fact checking you and saying he wasn't even in the league yet.
That's true.
Like that's why you didn't see it, and that's why
That's why I didn't see it.
Finger did warn the people ahead of time that he was off his game today.
That's true.
this is not underachieving. This is not.
But back to the Wemby the Wemby 50-point thing was much different in that this is a 7'3" guy who, as we've talked on this podcast all year, and we'll finish with this discussion here again, is going to stay out there. Is going to stay shooting threes. He's going to do what he did against the Wizards and just rain down. And if he makes them, the team is going to be in a world of hurt. He is not going to go down there and post up, back to the basket, David Robinson style, Shaquille O'Neal style, Hakeem Olajuwon style. Against the Lakers the other night, they had a fella called Max Christie, another wing player, banging on him and preventing him from getting space down there. It doesn't matter. He's going to play his game, and I will throw it out to you guys again. We all seem fine with that.
That was the underrated or underreported part of the Wemby's 50-point game is he darn near set the franchise 3-point record in that game.
Yeah.
You heard people say he shouldn't shoot threes, and he took it personally. Is what it seemed like.
I'll show you.
And I took that personally.
He made 8 of them against the Wizards, and the record is 9 by the rifleman Chuck Person. So, yeah, that's what he's going to do. He's going to take those 3-pointers. That was the fun part about the LaMarcus 56-point game. Not a single 3-pointer. It was all twos and free throws.
Yeah.
In a way, that's harder to do. That's a lot of work.
And we're not going to get into the Wemby injury too much on this podcast for fear of it being immediately outdated. Again, we are recording this before the Oklahoma City game. As of now, is he still doubtful, Tom?
Yes,
Or
that
is he
is
completely
correct.
out? He doubtful. We don't think he's going to play tonight after banging knees with Anthony Davis towards the end of that game. Did not play against Dallas. I guess there's a remote possibility that he could take the Floor Willis Reed style against the Thunder. Don't think he will, but I also don't think it's a long-term injury. So as we look, we're not going to make official predictions because it gets to this point where we're predicting games that already happened. But moving forward, before we meet you again, they will have played Oklahoma City, home against Utah, Saturday home against the Warriors before we meet again. To me, I think the Spurs will have one more victory than they do as of this recording when we meet again. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I do too. I think just beat Utah.
Yeah.
Utah's been a little more what do you want to say, competent lately. Like it's not a gimme game, but just beat Utah. Like they beat the Thunder, right? The Jazz did. Then they beat the Spurs at some point here. So it's not a gimme game, but show up and win that one, you'll be doing all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom does feel the same way.
Yes. 1-1.
Okay. And we're kind of having to disregard Oklahoma City. Who knows what happened? Okay. Well, that's a show. Again, sorry for the one.
Well, we're ending it on a bang there.
Back to David Robinson real quick. You know, he did face the basket quite a bit. He shot a lot of mid-range jumper. He got a lot of buckets in transition, but I looked it up. His career high for threes. Care to take a guess?
In a game?
Yes.
3.
I was going to say 2 or 3.
1.
1. Wow.
Like 7 times he hit 1 in a season. That surprises me. I was thinking maybe a little bit more, not anything outrageous, but
Luck. But yeah.
you know, he shot a lot of outside shots. He was
his bread and butter was what,
18-footer,
18-footer.
Yeah, and fans like altar boy Mike Finger were in the stands saying, get the post. 7 foot for God's sake.
Yeah.
Mike, I was an altar boy too way back, and I remember one of the good things about being an altar boy when you did certain things like a funeral, You know, something out of the ordinary. You got a little money. Was that the case in your small town?
I don't like where this is going.
No, I didn't. I never got money.
Okay.
I was really good though. Ringing of the bells. There's few that ever rang the bells better than I did. Perfect time.
There was a lot of pressure in ringing the bells, and if you're an altar boy like me and Mike, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I think
sometimes you live up to it, sometimes you don't. I almost always did, but on weeks like this, when I feel like I let the people down during the podcast, I got that obvious fact they were wrong on David. Of course, it was in 1987. I would have been way too young. I would have been. Well, let's not talk about how young I would have been. But this person, David Robinson was in the league '87. Sorry, I got that wrong.
And I think our listeners and viewers will not be surprised by the fact that I was no altar boy.
That's not a surprise either. Our producer has bore with us, Monty, the great Monty Bach. Sorry, we went a little over. Sorry, I was less than my best this week. Try to do better next time. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.